Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Tabletop Rpg Now. I am your host Corey. Obviously, this is not Dallas.
No, I am John. Back again.
That is John. Dallas couldn't make it today, so he asked a far superior player and DM to step in for him. Obviously,
He's gonna smack you when he gets back for saying that.
But no, we got a good show for you guys today. We'll be talking about kind of how to go about starting, your first DM campaign, on like what role sets to look at, what genres to look at, all kinds of cool stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So if you have any questions in the comments, go ahead and shoot them to us, and we'll try and answer them as we get them.
Yep, we've got a computer set up today, so we will actually be able to respond to you guys quickly, unlike last week. We got some complaints, so I brought in a computer, and we'll do our best this time.
Yeah. All right, so let's get started. So, I've never DM'd a game. I've kind of looked into it. He has DM'd a game, actually, right?
I've DM'd a couple different games. They were on a smaller scale and with close friends, so it was a little easier.
Tell me a little bit about your experience. How did you go about it? Like, having never DM'd before, how did you go about finding that group that you first DM'd for?
Well, it all really started out with, it was just some of the people that I played with before. It was people that I was friends with, I had played some of the games with, so we all had some general knowledge of it. And it was pretty obvious when our other game ended that I was the one that paid attention, or not paid attention, but I was the big rules, not lawyer, but I was the one who paid attention the most to the rules while everybody else was off. Like, oh, I'm going to hit this with a sword, or I'm going to cast this 9th level spell.
Right.
So it pretty quickly became clear, it's like if anyone was going to run the campaign, it was probably going to end up being me, because I paid attention to the specifics of the rules.
So was it just like a campaign had ended and y'all were looking for another thing to do, and then you just kind of stepped up to the role?
Yeah, the campaign that we were in ended, and we were kind of looking around at each other like, well, our DM moved away, so what are we gonna do now? And it really came down to it is like we started talking, we had a couple good ideas for just story arcs, so I sat down and I said, all right, I'm gonna try DMing a game. Bear with me, we'll get through this. And that's kind of how it is gonna start with most DMs on their first time. I did something that I really should not have done. The very first game I DM'd, I tried to go a complete custom story. And believe me, it is a very, very hard thing to do, as I found out pretty quickly.
That's actually, it's probably the most common thing that I hear, or that I've heard from people who have DM. That's how they kind of got started, is through, they were in a game, and then the game ended for whatever reason. The GM didn't want to DM anymore. He quit, he moved, whatever, and they were looking for basically somebody to step up and be the new DM and start a new campaign. So that's actually probably the most common way that I've heard people being DMs, or learning how to become DMs. And that's a fantastic way to go about it. You're already in the hobby, so you're already with interested folks who are into that stuff, and they probably like you, or because they haven't booted you out of the group yet. They tolerate your presence, I guess.
Yeah. Forced acquaintances.
That's right. But yeah, like, that's probably the easiest way to get started, is to just join a game, kind of learn what you can, make some friends, and then when you have free time to start your own campaign, or that campaign ends, offer to step up and run your own campaign. I'm sure most people are nice, most people are willing to let you do it. The way we do it in our big group is and we haven't actually had this happen as far as I know, but because it happened before I joined, but what we do is, people who want to run, they can submit ideas for how their stories want to go, and then people vote on which kind of campaign they want to play in, and then that dude gets to be the GM. But I think most of the time that's not the case. GM's kind of for the most part, the role nobody wants.
I wouldn't say that.
A lot of times it's the least sought after role. Everybody wants to be a player, for the most part.
I don't know. Once I got into DMing, it is a lot of fun, because what people don't really realize when they step up to that position is you don't just get to be the person running the story. You also get to be every single person in that world that your players interact with. You get to be the monsters that are kicking their ass. You get to be the people in town that they're talking to. You get to be that little weasel that's tricking them into doing an evil mission. I mean,
yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, and I think that's why so many people who do DM stay as DMs pretty much forever after that, right?
It is a lot of fun.
You know, I think a lot of people have that trepidation when they first start out as players. It's like, oh, being a DM is this huge responsibility. I want to take on that thing. But I think that once you actually, you know, stick your feet into the pool, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. It is a good deal of responsibility to step up into it. But once you kind of get your feet in the water and you figure out how it's going to go, then it becomes a lot easier to handle.
Right. All right, so cool. So that was your first kind of experience DMing.
Which I did touch on it.
What game did y'all DM for?
I was actually running a 3rd edition game because I started out my tabletop role-playing experience in 3rd edition. I know there are so many people out there that are just like, oh my god, 3rd edition, no, kill it with fire. And then all the players are over here like, yes, it was the best system ever. No, it was a good group, but the thing that messed with me the most was I didn't listen to my old GM's advice. And that was, don't try and create a world overnight. Run one of the modules beforehand. Figure out how the system runs from the DM's perspective before you try to jump in and create your own story. And it was a lot of unnecessary work that I put in to have the campaign eventually flop. So, trust your GMs, or you're advising people if they say run a module first. It will help. It may not be the most fun thing to run, but it will help you get the grips of how to run the campaign easiest.
Cool. Yeah, all right. So let's kind of walk through the steps here. So you decided you want to DM. Let's say that you don't have a group of friends that you're already playing with, and you kind of just want to play, you know, maybe a rule set that's not super popular. Like maybe you want to play something that's not D&D or Pathfinder, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't really have a group of friends that you're already, you know, in a cohesive game with. How do you think you'd go about doing that?
The way that I've seen a lot of people do it comes down to 2 different ways. The first way being online, because I've seen a lot of forums taking up the tabletop role-playing now, where they will decide on a rule set for the forum and people will GM. And I'm a part of one of those as is. The second way is a way that's been around for a lot longer, and that's by going to your local game store and either posting a request for players, and you can filter through the people who come in and say, okay, I want you, and I want you. Or you can go and look at the same place and see if anyone is looking for a DM.
Right.
So.
All right. So yeah, like I'd say personally, like go to Roll20, set up a little thing that you want to GM for whatever system. You know, I've already told you all my experience with that site. It's very DM starved, so I think that, you know, setting up as a DM should be fairly easy to find players for whatever system you're getting.
Yeah, setting up a campaign on Roll20 is easy in terms of setting it up. Finding players that will actually stick around can be a hassle, because I've noticed a lot of players will apply to every single game that pops up, and then when they get accepted to the one that they really wanted, they will drop all the others.
Right.
So be prepared if you're doing that to be sitting there a little longer than you're planning on, because your players may drop out to join a different game.
Yeah, like I would suggest for that just to get have more slots than you have players, so that you can kind of say, okay, you're in, and then when this guy drops out, okay, but I already have this slot open, so this guy's just gonna get bumped up into slot 4, so now he's in. Something like that, you know, have a system in place that you can kind of be prepared for when it does happen, because it's probably going to happen. All right, so that's kind of how you can go about it from that perspective. The other kind of way is similar to his way. You just find a game for a popular game in your area, like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, right? Join that game, make friends. make some friends with it, and then suggest your own game. Most people just like hanging out and having fun, as long as it's not super rules heavy. I'm sure most people don't have a problem if they're free going and playing whatever game. Honestly.
Yeah, I would make it a point. Do not schedule it in any way that would conflict with another game, because you do not want to be that one jerk that siphons people off of someone else's game to play your game. Nobody likes that guy.
Yeah, don't join up in like a Saturday game and then say, okay, now that I've met you all, I'm gonna make a Saturday game and I want half of you to be in my game now.
It's a bad deal.
Definitely switch it up and go to a different day. Find out when your players are free. All that good stuff. That's another good point to bring up when you're starting. Know your schedule. Know the player's schedule that you want, and make sure that's a day that pretty much everybody's available pretty consistently. Because you don't want players that are like, oh, I can make it this week, but next week I have something, like, or every other week I have something. Just make sure that y'all schedules are clear for whatever day y'all want to play it on. That's pretty basic.
Yeah. Well, and also, you don't always have to have it every single week. Like, for example, our Saturday game is every other week because it helps with people's schedules.
Right.
So even if they have something that's every other week, the week that they're free, they can come and play.
Yeah, for sure. We have like ours is a bit longer because it's bi-weekly. I think we do like a 7 to 8 hour game. I think if you do a weekly game, most of them are like...
Yeah, it gets close to like 10 hours every Saturday. We're sitting there from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Yeah, something like that. Most weekly games, you can kind of go a little bit shorter, like 4 or 5 hours, because you're meeting every week. So it's not that big deal. Like it's just whenever y'all are available, really. Like if you're running a monthly game, you may want to have it like a big overnight party session, whatever, if you guys are free. Obviously the more game time you get, the better. So just try and keep that in mind. Like the less game time you have, the more time you should want to spend on that day that you are playing, I think, for just to kind of keep everything on par. All right, so that's kind of how you go about finding a group. So what about choosing, a rule set that you want to play? How would you go about doing that?
From that, I would almost always go from the point of, if you have experience with the system. If you want to go about a new rule set, you're going to want to take at least 2 or 3 weeks to just read up on the set of rules, because you always want to know the rule set inside and out before you decide you want to start a game. The best way is usually if you can join a game that you aren't running, so you can learn how the player runs through the game. And then from there, you learn the basics of the rules, and you can step it up and run the game.
Unfortunately, that seems that depending on what system you're in, if you're not in like the super popular systems, that can be very difficult to do, because there's tons of different systems out there that are very cool systems, just nobody plays them, right? So, and a lot of these books for these systems are out of print, or they're limited availability, because the authors don't make a lot of money on them, because it's a pretty niche genre. So it can be kind of hard to find those groups sometimes. But don't let that limit you. I would say, like, if you find a cool system that you want to play, go for it, man. I'd say go for it. Don't think that you have to play one of the popular systems. So like, first off, you probably want to pick out what genre you want to play, right?
Yeah, and that comes down to, there are some popular genres and there's some more niche genres, but a lot of the popular ones include things like fantasy, like Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, sci-fi or cyberpunk, which come into things like Shadowrun. Right. There are horror, like the Call of Cthulhu.
Horror is really popular, yeah. Superheroes
as well, yes.
Yeah, and I call it the realistic ones.
Oh yeah, the modern day ones, the ones that feature people, like, maybe not in super crazy situations, but perhaps like war scenarios.
Well, I wouldn't even say just modern day. I'd just say realistic in any term. Like they use, like, from whatever era that they're in, they use like a realistic approach to it.
Okay.
Just to kind of keep it a little bit all encompassing there. So first, you want to choose what type of genre you want to be playing in. There's a lot of cool games in all the genres, so it shouldn't be really a limiting factor for you. Obviously, the most popular by far is fantasy because of Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, right? And then, but what are some other couple cool other fantasy ones that are out there?
A couple other fantasy ones that are pretty high on the charts. Things like Dungeon World. I have a little bit of experience with it, but not enough to fully run a game. Other than that, I know Rune Quest is a pretty popular one. They just recently released another book.
That's one of the older ones, isn't it? That's like one of the kind of ones that was alongside of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, that was another older one. That one was run off of a D100 system instead of a D20 system, so it was a little bit different in how it was set up.
Cool. All right, so let's kind of delve into that a little bit, and let's talk about kind of some of these systems that we mentioned. Obviously, we'll start with D&D. The most popular one, it's the easiest to get into with 5e. 5e is a very rules light system. It's very easy for beginners to get into. I think it's an awesome starting system. People who want complexity though might find it a bit lacking. It does require you to put in a lot of your own rules if you want a more complex game. Like I would say that if you try to run it as is out of the book, it's a pretty simple game, right? It's not going to be.
It's not a mind-bending game when you pull it out of the box. It's similar to setting up a skeleton and just kind of a loose framework. You can run a game on it, but you can definitely add a lot to it.
Right. That's kind of the double-edged sword of 5e, right? Is that it's very, very easy to get into, but because of its ease of its ease of play, it's also very limited in what it can do. You have to add a lot of your own stuff to it. All right, so that's 5e. Definitely the number one recommended for me if you're a beginner. I think because it's really easy. All right, next most popular one is probably Pathfinder.
Pathfinder is definitely up there. I don't know if it's the next most popular one, but it's pretty high up there. I've taken some interest in that recently due to the forum I joined, and I'm running a game on it currently. And it is based off of kind of old D&D. Like, they kind of took the essence of what D&D 3.0 and 3.5 were and kind of converted that into another game. And it is very similar in a lot of ways. And I like it personally just kind of because it's reminiscent for me from when I first started playing. So it is a very rules-heavy system in terms of you come in and you have the core rulebook, the expansion pack, the advanced races guide, the ultimate magic guide, the ultimate combat guide. I mean, there are books upon books upon books of rules for this game. And if you are jumping into it, it will look like a lot.
Yeah, like the only advice I'd give in regards to that, I haven't actually played Pathfinder. When you have so many different rules on your game, don't feel obligated to use them all. Like, they're there for you if you need them, but you have to be like, as a DM, you have to say, okay, this is too much. I don't want to use this, or there's too many classes here, so I'm going to cut down on some of these classes, and let your players know ahead of time before possibly they even join your game, right? Let them know what they're getting into. Don't just kind of don't let them show up with a character sheet and you're like, oh, that character's banned. That's kind of a dick move.
Yeah. What I would recommend in terms of character creation, when you're DMing your first game, have a session set aside where all your players come in and you work together to create the characters, so that one, you can keep kind of tabs on them and make sure that they're not going into things that you don't want them in, but also so that they understand, okay, this is the kind of thing that we need to look at.
Right, and that's something that I've touched on before is as a player, that's something that you really need to do when you're creating your characters, is you need to create your characters with the party's characters in mind, right? Don't just create this loner, dude who doesn't really work with anybody, because why is he in the party? And that's a great way to have the group together. Everybody's creating their characters, they're bouncing off ideas off of each other, and they need to You need to work together to create your characters so that they're cohesive and they're cooperative instead of being at odds with each other. And I think that's a great thing to do as a DM, is to kind of make your guys start off together and make their characters together. Right? I think that's an awesome thing to do as a DM. So with Pathfinder though, so Pathfinder has everything. It has so many classes, so many different rules to it, because it's just been expanded upon over the years, because it's fairly old at this point, right? How, like, when did it come about?
I don't know the actual date that it came out, but I know that when I started playing, Pathfinder was already around, and that was 6-7 years ago.
Yeah,
So
it's been out a good while. Yeah, and it has a lot of supplements to it. So don't feel obligated to use all the supplements. Pick a couple. One or two, maybe. On your first time, I wouldn't even pick any.
I would say if you're going to go into a system like Pathfinder, stick to the core rules the first time you run through it, because each additional book, while yes, it adds more options for the player, it also adds a high level of complexity that you as the DM have to deal with, and that's not something you want as your first time DMing.
Exactly. You kind of want to ease yourself into it, and kind of get comfortable with the rule set first, and then start adding on layers of complexity to it. And that's a good way to go about it. So that's kind of Pathfinder. It's very popular. It should be fairly easy to get groups together for. And it's obviously fantasy based. It's based on 3rd edition, so it's very similar to D&D, but it's got its own little world and its own setting. It's pretty unique, and it's got a lot of options. It's probably the system with the most options. You just have to take the time to learn them. So if you're looking for a game where you have like a bunch of rules already set up, that like no matter what you do, there's probably a rule for it somewhere in Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm. And even if it's not in the core rules, they have mounds upon mounds of third-party books that came out as supplements to the things that Pathfinder didn't actually cover. And you'll find a lot of things converted from 3.5 in 3rd edition book, or in third-party books. So,
all right, cool. Moving on, the next kind of one was it's kind of a bridge between sci-fi and fantasy, and you're actually kind of seeing that a little bit more. Is that some of these are mixing genres a bit. Some of these rule sets is actually Numenera. It was a Kickstarter one by Monty Cook, who I believe was one of the designers on 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a very it's another somewhat complex system. I'd say it's medium complexity. It's nowhere near as complex as Pathfinder is. It's got its own whole world. Like, Pathfinder uses a lot of recycled monsters from D&D because it was all OGL from D&D. Mm-hmm. So like a lot of the stuff you find in Pathfinder is the same stuff you'll find in D&D. Whereas Numenera has a whole new set of monsters, all these cool things, and the kind of story of Numenera is a little bit more interesting. It's kind of, you have all these different ages that have come and gone, so you have like all this future technology that are like artifacts in the world, but as a people now in your current era, y'all are kind of back in the Middle Ages basically. So you have all this like super cool technology, you just don't know how to use a lot of it yet. And as part of I guess the best way to put an example, it's like after Rome fell and everybody kind of went back to their own settlement-based cities, the technology of Rome went away, right? Like all the road systems and the aqueducts and all that stuff of the big cities went away because people didn't really use them anymore. So it's kind of got a similar feel to that, where there's all this cool technology in the world that's just you don't have the ability to create it yourself anymore. And that's one of the driving factors for that game is as players, you go out and find this technology and use it. And that's kind of like the big dungeon diving aspect of it is you're looking for all this cool lost technology. And there's tons of different classes and races you can be. Like you can be like mutants and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it's fairly easy as far as combat goes. It's pretty like your damage is set. Your rolls are kind of set. It's it's a little bit like when you're rolling, it's a little bit easier to kind of to get the hang of it than Pathfinder would be.
Not so much math and having to check
Yeah,
three
yeah.
tables every time you roll a die. It's
Yeah.
just, I know this and I roll it.
Yeah, so it's a very cool system. It's got an interesting, unique story. They're actually making a video game. The people who made Planescape Torment are making Planescape Numenera, Tides of Numenera, most funded Kickstarter game of all time. So I'm sure most of you have heard of it at least. Uh, so that's definitely cool. Check that out before the game comes out, and you'll have some cool lore to go off of. So moving on with sci-fi, the other kind of big one in sci-fi, and I've talked about that before, is Traveler. Traveler is what's called hard sci-fi, right? It's about kind of like the realistic,
Kind of
sci-fi.
gritty,
Yeah.
dark, sci-fi, futuristic.
So there's tons of different editions of it. It's been around since D&D as well, so like 70s, and so it's definitely one of the older games as well. And I actually have the Mongoose, the 2011 published Mongoose one. There was one that came out on Kickstarter in 2014, but it's like a huge Bible. I was like, no, I don't want to pick up that one. No thanks. It apparently has rules for every conceivable possibility, but people are like, yeah, it's like reading a science textbook. It's not very interesting to actually read it. I'm sure it's awesome. I'm sure it's awesome if you just know it off like in your head and you can play it. I'm sure it's like probably the best, right? But having to actually learn all of it, it's like going to school. You don't really want to do all that. So the 2011 Mongoose one is the one I have, and it's very again, rolls light, and that kind of makes it easier to dive into for a newer GM or a newer player. It's got that cool. One of the cool things that makes it unique is that it actually has a player creation minigame where the players basically get jobs. They have careers, and it's like a big dice rolling game to see if they can advance in their career or they fail in their career and get booted out. And the players age like 5 years every time they have to roll. So it becomes very risk reward. It's like you can keep going in your career, make more money, get more skills, but I could also get injured and die, or and the more you do it, the more dangerous it gets. So you have to kind of know when to call it quits.
Or else your character will be dead before the adventure starts.
That's right. So that's definitely a cool one if you're looking for like the more realistic sci-fi. I shouldn't say realistic sci-fi because I don't think there's any realistic sci-fi, but the more hard sci-fi stuff, the more grounded in what we know as people. Yeah.
The darker, harsher reality.
Yeah. And it's got a lot of rules for everything from like designing planets to to going on that. It's a very cool game if you kind of want to do anything, right? It's like, imagine colonial Europe, right? They were forming the colonies. You had pirates, you had colonies rebelling, you had new nations forming. It's all of that's kind of in there because that's kind of what the space age is you're kind of expanding these colonies that are so far away from the base worlds. There's really, like, you can run a campaign for anything. You can be traders, smugglers, pirates, soldiers, the planetary defenders, whatever. There's a lot of variety in what you can do with it, and I think that's very cool.
It's a very good sci-fi, almost like a sandbox system, where you can take whatever rules you want to or whatever storyline you want to, as long as it's in a sci-fi setting, and put it there. Yeah,
and actually that happens, right? A lot of the sci-fi systems are based on Traveler. Like, I think Firefly is actually the game system is based on the Traveler rule set, right? And you'll see that a lot of the rule sets are derived from other rule sets. Like, a lot of when they released the D20 Modern rule set, there's shitload of games came out that were based on that system, right?
Yeah, because everybody's got a different story to tell, and everybody has different ways they want to play it.
Yeah.
So,
and that's definitely another option, right? They have these base rule sets that aren't actually any game in particular. It's just, here's the rules, and make up your own game to apply them to. And so like if you really wanted to go be creative, you could actually make up your own game and play it like that. Definitely don't recommend that for a newbie, but if you really wanted to, that is a possibility, and there are different rule sets for that. So sci-fi, the other big sci-fi one is what?
Cyberpunk, sci-fi, that would probably fall into Shadowrun.
Shadowrun's definitely very popular, way more popular than Traveler probably. I actually haven't played the tabletop ones. I played the Kickstarter games. They're pretty fun, and they're very actually D&D-esque as well. I think with their own, they got a lot of their own flavor to it though.
Yeah, well, I think they were originally based around kind of the D&D system. They just kind of split off since the time period was so greatly different.
So
it does have, like, you do have dwarves and ogres and the different races from D&D. It's just set in a more futuristic time. It's
right.
As if the world progressed in technology, then all of a sudden the magic was brought back.
Yeah, and they have all these cool different classes in it. Like they're all pretty unique classes compared to the more traditional classes. It's definitely got a cool setting to it. It's a unique setting because it's like melding the old school fantasy with like the new school sci-fi.
You've got cybernetics hacking into computers. You've got controlling drones to fight for you. You've got guns. You do have the old school style go hit him with a hammer kind of things, and there are people that specialize in all those different areas. You have people communing with spirits. You have people that are using arcane magic. It's all just how you want to play it in your group, and each one of the classes has their own unique twist on them to integrate them a little bit with the technology that's available.
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the ones that are up there in terms of popularity. So it's definitely a good one to get into if you're looking at kind of cyberpunk sci-fi. Other sci-fi ones, obviously there's Warhammer. It's not really the same type of game. It's more of a just it's more of just battles, right? Like I think there is a Warhammer game that's like Dark Heresy. Is that what it's called? That's actually campaign based. But the actual popular Warhammer game is just my army versus your army, army building game basically.
It's much less based around roleplay, although I do know a lot of people get very into the I'm part of this army and I'm going to play it how I will.
Yeah, and that's why I want to include it, because even though it is that type of game, a lot of people do roleplay with it. So it's if you're looking for a more army versus army type game, you can expand onto it and make it a campaign type game. I think Dark Heresy takes kind of the more D&D-ish approach to it, where you're playing a specific character though. So if you play Dark Heresy, you're playing as one character, as opposed to the core game where you're playing an army, I believe, right?
I'm sure if we're wrong, we're gonna get 1,000 emails about, oh no, you're wrong. This is that. I can't believe. Oh my goodness.
But anyway, so yeah, that's one to look at for sure. Moving on to horror, obviously hugely popular genre everywhere.
No. It's taken a big turn in the gaming industry. A lot of horror games came out kind of in the 2008-2009 era, and that's kind of when a lot of YouTubers kicked off with horror video games. But they've been around in tabletop RPGs for a little while, even before that.
Right. One of the classics is what Call of Cthulhu.
Call of Cthulhu. That's a big one.
Yeah, that's an older one. They've actually had different games come out after that, I believe.
They've had a lot of good systems. I've heard a lot of people say good things about the system. I myself have not had a chance to actually play it yet. And I do know they did build several video games actually off of the subject.
Right.
So
yeah, it's for the original game, which is what a lot of people play, is it's very low powered, as like the players can expect to die in it. Like there's not a lot of chance at the players succeeding in their quest, is what I should say.
A lot of it is them just trying to uncover as many mysteries as they can before they eventually die in some horrible way.
But it's a fun game. I think it's a bit shorter than playing like an extended campaign like D&D, Pathfinder, Numenera. I think you can get through a full game of it in a few sessions. But it does take a long time to set up. I've heard that's one of the big gripes about it, is it takes a long time to set up. It takes a really long time to learn all the rules for it. It does have a lot of rules. Their newer Cthulhu game just came out a couple years ago, and it's very rules light. People actually don't like that, I guess, though, because there's a lot less that you can do as players because of that. But if you're looking for a more rules light version, there is a newer version. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But if you just look up the Call of Cthulhu, you'll find all 3 different versions, because there's I believe 3 different versions of it out. The newer version has you guys basically circling the globe. It's like a more global scale, and you can knock out the game in like one session as opposed to multiple sessions, which is pretty cool.
I definitely want to try and get into a game of that sometime.
Yeah,
I've heard a lot of good things about the system.
So that's kind of the big horror one. What are some other horror ones? There's tons of zombie ones, obviously.
Yeah, zombie ones.
This
falls into a little more of the realism or like apocalypse type, but Apocalypse World, the add-on for Dungeon World. You're always running from zombies. You're always trying to get missions done and not get eaten.
Right. Apocalypse World is one of the lesser known or lesser published ones, I guess I should say. You have to email the creator to get a PDF of it now, I believe. So you can find them on Amazon for like $200, but why pay $200? Unless you're just collecting it for whatever reason. It's a very interesting system. I really think it's awesome, and I really want to play it. It's a collaborative system, so as opposed to Dungeons and Dragons, where the DM sets up, this is your world, this is your story, blah blah blah. What do you do as players? The DM says, okay, this is the world, and then the player says, this is my character, this is what he adds to the world. It kind of goes around. Everybody helps create what the world is and what the currencies are and what what are the actual things in the world. And it's a very collaborative experience. It's a D6 system, so you don't need any special dice for it. You just go find some 6-sided dice. And one of my favorite mechanics is in that system, and that's the degrees of success. And everything in that game is by degrees of success. So if you roll like a if you roll a 10 or higher, you succeed at your task, right? And if you roll a 7
to 10, above a 10, it's a great success.
Yeah.
Between 7, if you roll a 7 to 10, it's you succeeded
at a cost.
Yeah, with a cost. And then a 6 or lower, you fail.
And something bad happens.
Yeah.
And the GM pretty much always gets to decide what bad thing happens to you, and they have guidelines based on how to do that. But it's a very cool thing, because it means that even if you succeed, it may not be worth the risk.
You may slay the dragon, but he may leave you with a curse.
Right, like when you're fighting monsters, instead of the DM saying, this monster attacks you in initiative, that monster attacks you in initiative, I don't believe there's actually any initiative in this game.
There is a little bit of it, but not as much. It's like each person gets to go once in a round. Yeah, it's like go in whatever order you want, and then once everybody's gone once, then you can reset. That's the extent of my experience was with that. There may actually be a rule for initiative. I haven't looked into it super deeply. From the games I've watched, I didn't notice an initiative. It was just, if you happen to attack a monster, and you don't roll good enough, that monster can attack you back, and that's kind of how the monsters go, right? And they do their damage by you failing. And the other kind of cool thing about it is like, even if you fail, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because you get XP for that. That's how you get XP in this game, is you by failing your rolls, you get 1 XP, and then if you get enough, like I believe it's your level +1 or something like that, you level up. And the way it's set up is so that it's easy to level, because you don't have any bonuses, anything in the early game. But then as you kind of start to get up there in levels, like to the mid game, then you stop leveling, because you have such good bonuses. It's very rare that you'll fail anything, so it gets really hard to level about the mid game on.
so it's definitely got a lot of unique things that it brings to the table, and I definitely highly recommend it if you want a very narrative driven game.
Yeah, Dungeon World is very good for narrative driven games. It's a very good one. I actually recommended it when some friends of mine were looking for a narrative based system. We ended up deciding on a different system, but they took some looks into it and they liked it.
Yeah. So that's so that was Apocalypse World, Dungeon World. They're based on the same stuff, just different genres. In horror, the other big horror ones, and these are, I believe, they're out of print now, but they still get played tons online from what I've seen. As Werewolf and Vampire the Masquerade. Obviously, some older ones there, and they're kind of like what they say they are. You're playing as a vampire in Vampire the Masquerade, and playing as a werewolf in Werewolf. Actually, a lot of people love the old White Wolf games. That's the publisher, and they have several different games, and they all run off of I believe the same system, just with different settings in them. So check those out if you're interested in like the vampires or the werewolves and stuff, and they might even have a zombie one that's the same. I'm not sure. Actually, I have to look at that.
I know probably do. Yeah. Zombies are pretty pervasive in pop culture today.
All right, so moving on, superhero ones. I've actually never played a superhero tabletop.
I have not, but I really wish I could have gotten one of my friends on here for this, because he loves superhero games and he is constantly telling me stories. From what I understand about these superhero games, I know I'm going to probably get a ton of flack for this, but they're a little less mechanics driven. From what he described, is like his character could literally just do whatever as long as the DM approved it. Kind of following the rule of superheroes, if it's cool, it can happen.
Right.
Which, if you have the right DM for that can be a great game. I would love to personally play one. So, but in terms of personal experience, all I have are stories that my friend has told me, and he loves it. It's very almost anime style in the battles. It's not so much one person winning or losing. It's I'm going, like, if it's cool, it happens. Like the underdog rising from the fight can always happen.
Yeah. The type of stuff that Dallas hates, basically. There actually is an anime style one. I'm trying to remember what it's called, because I was thinking about it when you brought up superheroes, because it's a very high powered. It's all about like what you see in an anime is what they can do. So it's like all super world ending powers and all this kind of crazy stuff like that.
Super world ending powers that 3 episodes later are completely obsolete.
Yeah. It's like Frieza can destroy the world.
Next episode, he's dead.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, sorry, I don't have a lot of experience with superhero stuff, so
need to get Gary on here and have him talk about that.
We'll have to get somebody else to kind of touch on that for you guys. Now next is kind of the realism ones, like the ones that take place, like the detective noir ones, GURPS and what are some other ones?
I'm trying to think. I haven't had much experience with them, but I know there were a couple of them that were like World War II, almost like that era.
Yeah.
Where you had the older rifles and you were doing military missions.
Yeah, like things of that nature. That'll be like all your historical and your realistic stuff. So expect low powered players. Expect a lot of rules, because there's a lot of rules attached to real life.
Unfortunately.
But for an overall one, GURPS is awesome, because GURPS covers everything. Like it's not its own setting, but it's basically like here's rules for every age. So like here's weapons for every age. Here's things you can be in every age, from like the Stone Age on to like future sci-fi stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a cool all-encompassing system. If you just kind of want to get your toes wet into this stuff. If you want more in-depth stuff, there's definitely more in-depth to this is a World War II simulator, or this is a detective modern day detective game.
Well, and very much so, like I mentioned earlier with D&D 5th edition, like that's rules light, and it could almost be considered a skeleton system. There is some story and stuff behind it. GURPS almost comes down to a literal, here's a rule set, have your own world with it.
Yeah. And a lot of games, like honestly, a lot of systems are like that. Well, they'll just give you a system based upon, whatever genre it's in, and it'll be like, make your own world. We don't support worlds for this, so.
Yeah. Well, and it's a good idea for a lot of the smaller RPGs to start out that way, because if you create this rule set and it's a great rule set, but you bind it within a certain world, then players might be less likely to pick it up.
Right. Yeah, like for sure, and I think most of the time, from everything I've played, most people are just like creating their own worlds anyway.
It's part of the fun of being a DM.
Yeah, but for modularized games, you definitely do need your own world. That, like Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of their modules take place in what, Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, Forgotten Realms, Faerun. Sometimes they take place in things like Dragonlance.
Right.
So.
Yeah,
you got a bunch of different little worlds.
That's kind of, I would say, like that's the plus side of having a world attached with the system, is that the creators can keep continuing to support adventure modules and stuff like that, where they're like, here's a scenario for you guys to play. It takes a lot of the weight off the DM's shoulder to have to constantly be creating scenarios for players. So those are kind of like the basic genres. So you can honestly just go with whatever you feel like playing, and I'm sure you can find people either online or find a group of friends that play other tabletop games. Most people interested in tabletop games are willing to try other tabletop games. So just find fellow hobby enthusiasts and tell them you want to play such and such game, and ask them if they're interested. Man, you just gotta ask. So
yep.
Hopefully you can get a game together. As far as how many players should be in your game, the general rule for most systems is 4 to 5, right?
Yeah, 4 to 5. 6 you can usually get by with, but you're gonna have to, either the players are going to be a little stronger than the average monster setup, or the monsters you'll have to bump up as a DM. For a starting game, I would recommend 4 to 5 though.
Yeah. Definitely less players the better for the GM starting out.
To an extent. Not enough players.
From 4, like the ideal for a new DM, I would say, is 4 players, right? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't go under 4 players, just because there's not enough role diversity at that point. You need people playing the different roles in a lot of these games, because they're a lot like MMOs in that regard, where they have different roles that they have to play, like healer or DPS or tank or whatever. And if you have too few players, then you're not covering all your roles, and it gets actually harder on the DM, because then he has to say, okay, well, now I have to scale back the encounters off of the book because they don't have the required ability to deal with this as normal. Mm-hmm. So anything, like, I think as a new DM, anything under 4 you're putting in more work, and anything over 5 you're putting in more work, with almost any system, because I think they all kind of base themselves a little bit off of D&D, because
it depends on the system. If they're similar to D&D in that you're playing a single character, then they could have gotten some of their influence, but a lot of the games have branched off, and while D&D may have been one of the first big ones, a lot of the games have kind of come up on their own. So, and that also varies. Like D20 systems, a big influence is D&D. Right. When you get into like the D6, D10, D100, whatever, the other systems, you're going to have different rule sets.
Oh, for sure, definitely. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, in general, they, like, when these rule sets come out, they're generally designed for 4 to 5 players. That's all.
It's a good number of people that you can get together on an average basis without too much trouble trying to coordinate.
Right.
Unlike our group, which is 8 people and a DM, and then we all have to make sure that we get our schedules in line.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so those are kind of just like Cliff Notes versions of some of the more popular systems. If you go to learntabletop.rpgs.com, they actually have uh, a kind of guide that you can look at. You can just click on. It has a bunch of like the rule sets. You click on the rule set. It tells you kind of more cliff notes on it. It says here's what the system is. Here's the pros of the system. Here's the cons of the system. Here's what reviewers said about this system.
It's kind of a summary guide, so you can pick out a good system you want to try.
For sure, it's definitely a very cool site to go to if you want to experience a new type of system, and you don't necessarily know all the different systems. You can go and check it out and find a new system that you may like. I actually just saw one earlier called Hillfolk. I'd never heard of it. Sounds pretty interesting. It's very narrative driven, and you're playing Iron Age hill tribes, and it's about dealing with the conflict, outside and inside of your tribe.
No. And on the topic of story-driven ones, there's actually a Kickstarter game that came out. It's on the internet. It's not a in-person game, but it's called Storium, and there are no dice rolls. It is all based around sitting around and creating this story. You start out the game, you've created your character, the DM creates the world, and he sets up situations. And as your characters progress through the story, they get cards, which are their actions or their things they can do. And whenever a problem comes up, they say, like, they may have an acrobatics card or something like that, and they use that acrobatics card to perform a dance for somebody and impress them. Or, well, it's you can literally create every aspect of the game because there is no set. There's a set rule set, but there is no set storyline.
It's like an improv game, and then because it's a game, they need some sort of rule. So they're like, here's these cards. So these are basically your guidelines for your improv. So put this card down, and you have to be within this guideline of improv, right? Is that kind of how it is?
And the DM has a lot of control over what the players get and how the cards work. So I thought it was a fun little one. I supported it on Kickstarter. I've tried it out a little bit, haven't gotten my hands too wet with it, but I'm impressed with the system overall.
And that's kind of another thing I want to touch on is Kickstarter has kind of spawned a whole lot of tabletop games that people have been wanting to try. So there's like steampunk ones on there. There's more fantasy. There's a whole bunch of different stuff. If you haven't found something that you like that's currently released, go look on Kickstarter and see if there's anything currently in the development stage that you can possibly fund. Support your developers and whatnot.
Yeah, if you have a group of friends that's already good to go and you want to run a game but you guys can't decide on one, talk to the group, see if you can find a common genre that you all want to play, and maybe go check out a Kickstarter. Say, we don't really have any attachment to a game that's currently out. Let's try one that's just coming out. We'll try it when it comes out, and all of us will sponsor it, and all of us will get the game when it comes out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's always fun to try new things, and especially as adults. I'm sure it's different, with children who don't really have disposable incomes, but as adults, and a lot of adults play tabletop, everybody kind of has their own disposable income. So usually speaking, it's not a huge deal to drop $40 on a new game every now and then. I wouldn't say do it every day, but
no, don't. No, Kickstarter is a death trap for if you stay on the site, you will find things you like, and it will be the death of you, or at least your wallet. But continuing on, we've covered genres.
So yeah, you found the system you like. So now I have my system. So now I gotta go find my players. We already talked about how to kind of go about finding your players, either local game shops or local hobby shops, whatever has people playing. If you live in an area that doesn't have any, you might be limited to like Meetup or Roll20. Definitely go on Meetup, and if you want a live game, go on Meetup and start up a group for your area, and kind of get people together, because there's anywhere you go, there's going to be people that want to play. Or if you just don't have the time commitment or for whatever reason, you can go on Roll20 and set up a Skype one, or just over text or whatever. I personally even on Roll20, I'd want to do Skype and have video chat and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and they do have the video and voice chat set up now,
Yeah.
so you can actually do it without having to have a secondary program. You can all sign up and all have voice chat within the game.
They had that when I played, or when I checked it out, but it wasn't. There was like a weird lag time to it, and I just ended up using Skype. I actually used Google Talk, actually, not Skype.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, definitely do that. There's no real excuse for not being able to find a group. Honestly, like in this day and age, with online connectivity, you can find a group, even if it's by doing play by posts. There's always a way to get a group together nowadays. Yeah. 20 years ago, it might be an understandable argument, but nowadays, there's no excuse.
Well, there is ways to find games anywhere. It depends on the type of game you're looking for. Because I know, looking online for a long time, I was not able to find a game I was happy with. Either the people were jerks, or the game wasn't being run well, or like it was going extremely slowly. So that is one complication that you might come into.
As a player, that's definitely something, like when you're looking for new games and stuff. And I've talked about that before, but you have to make sure you mesh with your people, and if you don't mesh with your people, there's no reason to be in that game. So I mean, that's definitely one thing to look out for. But in terms of GM, be selective, because there's so many players to GMs, like the ratio is retarded. So you shouldn't have that much trouble finding players for your games, honestly. Mm-hmm. As a player, you might have a hard time finding a GM for your specific game. Like honestly, if you want to play a less known system, be a GM, don't be a player, right? You can get, or at least do something where, like, I'm gonna GM for a while and then somebody can switch with me. That way you can play it. But with the lesser known systems, you're probably not going to find that many GMs.
Well, and here's a secret that I figured out a long time ago, and it's, well, not a long time ago, but if you decide, hey, I want to play a system, start GMing. When you get your group of players, maybe you've done 2 or 3 games with them, say, hey, does anybody else want to try and run a game? At this point, they know the rules, they know how the games run pretty well, and they probably feel really comfortable with the rule set. They'll probably want to try and step up. At least one of them will be curious enough to say, sure, I'll try running a game. And then you can step down, you can help coach them into the DMing position, and boom, you've created your own game. You've got them running the game, you're helping them out with the rules a little bit, and you can sit back and play the game you wanted to play.
Yeah.
It'll take a little bit longer, but it's a good way to both invest in the future, because now more people are playing your game, and there are now 2 DMs instead of none.
That's right. You just gotta think of it like an evil mastermind, man. Like, how can I manipulate my minions into doing what I want? So I want to play this game. So how can I get people to let me play this game? And it's by doing the bait and switch. Like, oh, I'm GMing this game. Blah blah blah. Oh, you look like you're having fun. You want to GM this game? Cool. Yeah. Now I'm a player. I got what I wanted.
Yeah. Be prepared that if you do that, it's going to take a lot of, like, you're not going to be able to play your game immediately. You will be playing as the GM, and you'll learn a lot about the rule set, and you'll figure out how the system works. You may discover you don't really want to play as a player. You may want to stay as the GM, but always encourage people who are beginning as GMs. Like, I've started GMing. I want to encourage more people to do it, because I've found it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a lot of fun, and it's kind of one of those rewarding challenges. It's a challenge. Every time, players are difficult, and players are intentionally assholes to you. They try and make things difficult for you, but it's I think it's a pretty fun experience for sure. So kind of going back, this is your first time DMing.
Always want to start simple. If your system allows it, run a boxed campaign first. Yeah, it will help you get a handle on the rule system if you don't already know the rule system. If it's your first time GMing, it'll help you understand the pacing of how an adventure usually goes. Don't make the mistake I did and start right off the bat just creating your own world overnight and trying to run a system from it, because you will either lose the interest of your players because you haven't fleshed out everything yet, or you will kill yourself overworking trying to get everything done. It takes some time to become a good GM and know how to manage your time correctly. So
Yeah, I mean, it's like with any new job you pick up. You have that learning period where you have to kind of learn the ropes and stuff. It's the same with GMing. You have to kind of experience the rule set in that regard. And a lot of times, people go into it not prepared that the players are going to, which I don't understand why, because it always happens. The players are going to throw chaos into whatever you try and throw at them. So, whatever ideas you had for what was supposed to happen is probably not going to happen. You have to be prepared to deal with that. Whether it be you saying no, you're doing this, I don't care what you say, or trying to roll with it, or
and that is a thing.
However it is you want to deal with it, deal with it that way. Don't force yourself to try and be something that you're not really.
Yeah,
because that's another recipe for disaster.
Yeah, one thing to note is if you're starting a game, you need to be flexible, because as a whole, it is not the player versus the GM or the player versus the DM. It's you and the players working together to create a story that all of you enjoy. And you just happen to be on opposite sides of the table doing it. You are the one that's controlling the base framework of the story, and they're the ones that are interacting with the story and filling it out. Think of it as almost like writing up a Mad Libs. You write up this framework for a story, and you leave the blanks for where the players are going to interact and change how it goes. And depending on how the players act, they may do what you want. They may throw in something stupid or crazy or unique that you didn't think of.
Yeah, I bring it up from time to time, but it's like improv. I have a friend that's in an improv troupe, and that's kind of one of the things is somebody will set up a scenario, a situation for the rest of the people, and it's their jobs to react however they want to react to that. And everybody, like the whole idea should be everybody meld with everybody. Like, one of the first rules of improv is say yes. Don't say no to things. You have to be able to roll with things, right? You have to say, oh, he shot me, but I didn't want to die. But okay, well, you said it already, so now I'm gonna roll with it. That's kind of one of the things that it definitely directly applies to tabletop games in my experience. As the DM's basically setting up the scenario and the setting for the players to act out however they please. I mean, that's how it is in my eyes, and that's kind of one of the things I view as a player is like when the DM sets up a scenario, I don't think, how I can fuck his scenario up, or how I can mess with his stuff, or how I don't want to do such and such. You move past that by just saying yes to whatever he's offering. Like yes, not saying yes to whatever he's offering, but saying yes to the scenario that you're placed in, right? So, like, I'm in this scenario now. There's nothing I can do about that. That's happened. Now, how do I deal with this? Mm-hmm. And then it's on the DM to accept how you deal with it.
For example, like, one of the biggest things that I had to learn was, like you said, like, they can always throw a wrench in whatever you have planned. And I eventually got to the point where I was making up, okay, they're gonna interact with this guy no matter what path they take. How they interact with him is going to change depending on the path they took, and then how they react while talking to him is going to send them down a different path and create 2 or 3 different paths of the most likely things that they're going to do. And always be ready to create a 4th if they find the one thing that you didn't think of. Because it will happen eventually, and they will call you on it if you aren't, okay, all right, let's go.
Yeah, like, one of the things I would suggest as a first-time DM is stay away from specifics, right? Don't say, like, this has to happen for this to happen and that to happen. Like he said, they meet this guy, right? It's not, I meet this guy in the woods on my way to the trek after doing such and such. It's just, I meet this guy. That can literally happen anywhere. You can place this guy anywhere and they can meet him, right? So that's considered a good plot hook. A bad plot hook is, and I've given this example before, is the thief stole something from the prince, and like these would be player characters. The thief stole something from the prince, is on the run, but the thief also happened to witness a murder. So when they send the guards out to find him, maybe the thief uses that as leverage, and then so that they don't kill him, and then they bring him back, and then he points out the murderer, blah blah blah. It's an interesting concept, but it relies on so many specific things to happen, and in an improv game you can't rely on those things to happen. And that's the big issue that I see a lot of people have, is they expect very specific things to happen all the time.
Well, and even then, it's like I made the point of they meet this guy and do that. They had the option where if they reacted in a certain way, if they left the area, or if they didn't fulfill their mission, they weren't going to meet the guy. That's like every decision that you make about the campaign, have a backup decision. If they meet the guy, they do this. If they don't meet the guy, they do that. If they decide that they want to go save the town, this happens. If they decide that they're like, nope, I'm going to go be a mercenary, then this happens.
Right.
As I've seen that happen, and it's an awkward situation to be put in when you get caught on it. Just practice preparing for the unexpected. Maybe what I did for a little while was find that one person in the group who always comes up with the unexpected ideas, sit down with them, put them in a scenario, say, okay, not exactly what you're going into, but maybe a different scenario that's similar in one or two aspects. Say, okay, this happens, what do you do? And if they ask questions, give them answers. If they say, okay, do this, then say, all right, let me work through what would happen then. So you can kind of get an idea of what the person who is most likely to push the boundaries would do. And then I would also say, pull in like maybe the person who's usually pretty on par with what you want to do, and sit them down and put them through the same situation, so you can kind of get a broader spectrum of what you think the players might do.
Yeah, but there again, be comfortable with what you want to do. These are awesome things for like when you're writing your own story. But if you don't feel comfortable with doing that, that's what they have modules for, man. Just run modules, run adventure paths. These are set things, or just let your players know that you plan on running a linear campaign where point A to point B happens. People, as long as you let your players know beforehand, for the most part, people are cool with whatever.
And if they aren't, they'll usually drop out of the game before you even start.
Yeah. So yeah, make sure you're definitely comfortable with what you're doing. Don't try and branch off into some weird stuff that you have no idea what you're doing.
Make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into before you jump headfirst into it and find out that instead of a pool of water, it's a piece of concrete.
Yeah, like our suggestions are more geared towards the person who kind of wants to kind of be creative in his own world and all that stuff. Because that's what a lot of people have trouble with, even that they try and do their own world, but they don't really know how to react to what the players are doing in that world. And that's the best advice I can give, is to just be general, man. Don't be specific in what you have planned. That way you can just roll with it whenever they decide. Don't over prepare, right? Don't come under prepared, but don't over prepare.
Yeah. Just as an example, when I prepare for a game, the average set is maybe a page long for a session. That session is maybe 3 hours, 2-3 hours. I don't do long sessions as a GM, just because I'm still learning, and I don't have the time to spend preparing out that many details that far ahead of time. But a lot of it comes down to, okay, where are they when you start? Here's a couple options they could go down, and start kind of branching it out. Like I divide mine into 2 columns. Like, if they take this path, here's where they go. If they take this path, here's where they go. And then go down. It's like, okay, from there, here's a couple decisions they make. Here's a couple things that are going to happen regardless of what they choose. Here's a couple things that hinge upon what they did. And then just do that for a couple different paths. It doesn't have to take a ton of time. I usually spend maybe an hour or two just kind of thinking through different scenarios and prepping it out and typing it all up. And then as I'm typing it up, I also go through and change, because as you see something in front of you on paper, or as you think through it a little more, your ideas on the thought might change. Like you might say, oh, it would be super cool if they met this copper dragon and befriended it, and go on and on and on. And then while you're typing it up, you think about the, what if they attack it? And you don't want to put your players in a position where they could get themselves killed based on a dumb decision.
And that brings up a good point. If you don't want your players to do something, don't give them the option to do it. I mean, it's as simple as that. Like, so maybe he wants them to see the screen dragon, but doesn't want them to fight him. So maybe the screen dragon is off in the distance, flying, and they have no way to reach him. Or maybe they show him wiping out an army of men so that they can instill fear into the players, so that they know if they attack this dragon, they're going to die. Something along those lines. Don't allow your players to do things. And I know that sounds kind of bad to say, but don't allow your players to do things that you don't really want them to be able to do, because it compounds the problems later, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I found a good workaround for wanting them to see something but not necessarily interact with something is not necessarily the, oh, so-and-so said this happened, but using the scrying spells. Like maybe there's a higher level wizard or cleric or somebody that has magic that's sitting there and saying, like, we need to look and see what's happening. Like, we heard there's news, but we don't really know. So the group is there when the guy is looking through and finding this information. They see what's happening, but they can't influence anything from where they are.
Right.
Kind of almost making a cinematic, but understand it that the players actually see what happens instead of them being there to actually influence it.
Yeah, so that's definitely another trap that's easy to fall into. Just make sure you're aware of that, like something, because your players will like in my first game that I was in, and I've talked about this before, but we had this super powerful orc guy who we weren't supposed to fight, but we fought him and we killed him. And so we ended up with this uber powerful weapon that was an issue for the rest of the campaign, right? It was like a +3 save or die weapon at like level 2. So it became a huge issue for the actual game itself, and a big stress point for the game itself because of that, because he allowed this to happen when he really shouldn't have, right? Mm-hmm. And that happens from time to time. Those are mistakes people make, but that is a big thing that you need to try and steer away from as a newbie GM. Don't be afraid. I said, as far as the improv goes, say yes to your stuff, but don't be afraid as a GM to say no to your players when needed.
Ultimately, the GM has final say over what happens in the campaign. In terms of logic, try to be reasonable with it, but if you don't want something to happen, you can say no. No matter what it is, like, if they try acrobatics to like jump over something, or if they try to like sneak up on this thing and you don't want that to happen, you can have them roll, you can have them do whatever, but just know at the end, it's like, no, it does not happen. He sees you, there's something that complicates it, it doesn't happen. Because at a certain point, the DM needs control over the stories. Because if the DM loses complete control, then who's to say that the players can't just make this uber powerful weapon? If the DM can't control the stories, then all of a sudden they have it. Now, not to say you should try and constrict every single little detail, but if there is some major point in the game,
I mean, just use common sense. It's pretty common sense. You should know, as it's your story. You should know that this is pivotal, and that if you allow the players to do whatever, then they're either gonna die and nobody will have fun, or like if it's, I'll say it like this: if there's something that is not going to be fun for your players, don't allow it to happen. Like if the end result is gonna end up not being fun. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say like people will die, and that's not necessarily, like, I'm saying like an overall, Like if they go and attack the dragon, uh, maybe something swoops in and saves them. Maybe the dragon just doesn't even worry about him and flies off.
Just swipes them with his tail, knocks them all out, and just flies off because he has bigger issues to deal with.
Or maybe they kill the dragon, right? Maybe they kill the dragon. If they kill the dragon, I'd say let that happen. Don't really take that away from them. Like if you give them the option to do it, then don't take it back, right? What I'm trying to say is don't give them the option to do it to begin with. But if you happen to give them the option, let it play out. Like honestly, and then you just have to deal with the consequences at that point.
Yeah.
Like if they accidentally kill your big boss, roll with it.
Yeah. If they kill the big boss, then by consequence, somebody else is going to step up and take his place. Or perhaps if you killed him before he was able to do something, then maybe something doesn't happen that was pivotal in the success of this city or this nation. Something happens because of what you did. The game is never has a choice without consequences. There are things that are tied into the world that will change depending on what the characters do. Say this guy is going to kind of like raise an entire city of dead people and send it and attack this nation, and ultimately the nation was going to be wiped out. If you kill him before that happens, that nation doesn't get destroyed, but maybe that guy was going to try and do it because he saw this nation was corrupt. And after they kill him, they see that this guy was right and he was doing the right thing in trying to destroy the nation. They find out about its corruption later.
Yeah, I mean, like honestly, it comes down to, again, and you said this earlier, rule of cool. If it's cool, let it happen. If it's something that will break your game, don't let it happen. It's kind of hard to say, specifically what you should and shouldn't allow, because everybody's different and certain people can roll with certain things better than others. But again, do what you're comfortable doing. If you're not comfortable allowing them to do it, then just don't let them do it. It's really that simple to me. Don't try because we said that you should be doing such and such. Don't try and do that if that's not something that you're comfortable doing. And once you make your decision, you need to kind of stick to it, right? So like, I'm telling you, no, you can't do this. He kind of argues with me. You need to shut it down. Say sorry. We can talk about it after the game, but this is my decision. I'm a new DM. I'm gonna make mistakes here and there. You guys just need to accept that and roll with it. Good and bad stuff's gonna happen on both sides. Mistakes on both sides are gonna happen on my part. So, my decision's final. We can talk about it after the game if it's an issue.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing to note. During the game, be firm with your decisions. If you make a ruling on something and a player starts complaining, reinforce that decision. Say, no, this is what's happening because I said so. If it's something mechanically that you make a decision on, if it's maybe not covered in the rules or if you don't like how it's ruled, be consistent. If you say that falling damage, instead of every 10 feet, it's every 5 feet that the damage starts getting applied, keep that, write that down, make a note of that. Keep that for later. If you say that maybe spellcasters cannot cast when there is somebody right on them, if they have an attack of opportunity, they just flat out cannot cast, then write that down and keep track of that. There are a lot of rules that you may want to add as house rules. You want to try and flesh those out as much as you can beforehand, but there are some things that it's like the first time it comes up, if you have to make a ruling, write it down so that you can remember it for the next time.
Yeah, try and have all your house rules set up beforehand, but like I said, as a new DM, you're not going to cover all your bases and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to forget stuff, right? So I'm sure your players will be understanding. Just the first time it comes up, make a house rule, say I want to roll it this way, and I will write that in my thing. So on both sides, anytime it happens, this is the way it's going to play out. Definitely make sure that it goes both ways, right? So don't say, only players get AO'd when they take ranged attacks and melees, but my monsters don't because they're monsters. Just be consistent both ways. That way your players will feel it's more fair.
No. Now, if there are ways to get around that, because there are things like, for instance, in Pathfinder, there are feats that allow you to avoid attacks of opportunity or things like that. Like, if players are going to rule by that, then when they ask why they're not getting attacks of opportunity, just go, they have a feat or they have an ability that allows them to prevent that. Don't give it to them every time, but for certain enemies, you can give them things to tweak how they fight and to tweak the rules to their favor. Never be afraid to look at a monster and tweak it slightly. Don't make it a game-changing, world-ending monster if it's a goblin or something like that. But like, say you want your campaign to be set in like an area that's being ravaged by elementals, like maybe fire elementals are wreaking havoc. Instead of using goblins, use goblins but give them like a fire attack and take away something that they had, so that they're thematically fitting but not so much on a different power level.
Right. He's basically saying don't add a bunch of shit to your monsters. That buffs them up. Like, as a new DM, I would say that if you're going to modify things, modify them towards the underpowered spectrum as opposed to the overpowered spectrum. Like, if it's equal, if you make it equal, that's the best. If you say this is a little overpowered, then don't use it. As a new DM, don't use it, because the consequences of an overpowered monster killing your player, you either have to say, well, now I'm going to retro this because I effed up as a DM, or I'm going to let it happen, and then the players are going to suffer and be kind of resentful a little bit because they're having to blow money to revive or whatever.
Or in some cases, in some systems, you can't revive, so their character is permanently dead now.
Yeah, so like when you're modifying things, you want to modify them to the benefit. I want to say to the benefit of the players. And in regards to that, you want to make sure that anything that you do is so that it's interesting and fun for the players. Don't just say, well, my monster would be cooler if I gave him,
that's
uber weapons or whatever, and then one shots on my players. It's not fun for the players.
Yeah, and there are times where you make a monster stronger. The thing to do with that is, if they're fighting multiples, they don't fight as many. They fight fewer powerful monsters.
Well, for a brand new DM, I would just suggest
for a brand
not
new
doing
DM,
it at all.
I would say just stick with the basics of what's in the book. This may feel kind of bland, but it's like, if you're gonna adjust or modify anything,
you need to understand it first, right?
Understand it first, but also, if you're doing it, talk to someone else. Talk to your previous DM or anybody else who knows the rules well. Talk to them, ask them if it seems balanced. Check it against some things. You can find loads of stuff online where people have modified. If you can find a template for something similar to what you're using, compare what you're doing to them, or if it looks balanced enough, just take what they have. People have done tons of stuff modifying online, and they'll post it and let it know so that everybody can use it.
Yeah, there's definitely tons of monsters online for different systems, and even 5e has its own. In the DMG, it tells you pretty straight out, like, here's how you calculate your monster strength, and here's a table of what you can add and what you can't add, blah blah blah. It's very cool, and it's very in depth on how to make a balanced monster of your own creation. But then again, there's tons of monsters in the bestiary already. You can just change their names and use their stat blocks, and it would effectively be the same a lot of times. Just for sure, make sure that they're balanced, leaning towards underpowered for your players as a newbie. It's better for them to blow through stuff than it is for them to get crushed by stuff, because you can't take back them getting crushed by stuff as easily, and you can always kind of slightly gear up stuff if it's a little bit underpowered. And also, the other big thing is as a new player, and this is with D&D, and I'm sure it's the same with other systems, is that you have your different action economies, right? You have your players. Each player has their own action, and then your monsters each have their own action. So when you're doing bosses, your boss may only have one action, so inherently he's going to be weaker than your players because he has less actions per turn. And they mitigate that. Some big bosses have multiple actions or
multiple attacks, multiple turns within the round, or their attacks are much more powerful or hit areas instead of single targets.
Right.
Whereas a lot of what the players will dish out is single target, and it's all of their action to do it.
But kind of going into that, one of the suggestions I give is if your players are kind of blowing through things, instead of bumping up the CR, just add more monsters. Adding more action economy to your side is hugely beneficial. Assuming that they can hit the players, don't just add a bunch of stuff that will never be able to touch your players, right?
Yeah. Don't add 5 goblins to a fight with like 2 displacer beasts. It's like your goblins at that level will not be able to hit them.
Right. I mean, that's in 5e they would be, but just as a general rule of thumb, in most of the systems, there's like caps to what they can hit, right? So make sure that they're able to actually do something. But that's the easiest way to balance an encounter, in my opinion, is if your players are blowing through encounters, just add more monsters. Don't try and bump up the difficulty of the monsters, just add more of them. If you bump up the difficulty too hard, they actually get to a point where your players will get destroyed by them a lot of times. Because of their modifiers, in a lot of systems, their modifiers are just too good. Like the players won't be able to hit them, or they'll one-shot players, or things like that. So, and that is a mistake that a lot of new DMs make. And I see if some of our DMs make is that they try and bump up the CRs, the challenge rating of the monsters instead of adding more monsters in, and it creates very deadly encounters for us.
Yeah. Well, and one thing to note on that is, if you ever find yourself in that position where you have made an encounter that's a little over your head, like it's wiping through the party or it's hurting the party more,
cheat. I would cheat if I was the DM.
As the DM, it is in your rulebook. You can cheat. It's not cheating so much, but it's the players don't know everything.
Right.
They have a limited field of view. You as the DM see everything. So from your perspective, if something's wiping through these guys and they're just not dealing enough damage to it, something that I've found works fairly effectively, don't change the power level of the boss, just lower its health a little bit. Like if I found that just reducing the big bad guy's health by 10 points, they'll kill it 2 rounds quicker, and that will save 1 or 2 people from dying. Now, in my campaigns, I generally don't like killing players because I don't like them having to go and create a new character because then they get frustrated with it. But that's my playstyle. If you don't mind having a player die off, then you might not bump it down as much. That was like a low-level boss, and I started out, and being that I didn't have enough experience at the time, I started out with a little more health than it should have had. So in the middle of the battle, I just adjusted that after one of the guys hit it. It's like, oh, you hit it really hard, and he's looking a lot more hurt now. So just little things. It's like the players don't even have to know it ahead of time. You can bump stats up and down a little bit to adjust while you're going.
Right.
I wouldn't recommend bumping them up if they're fighting something and just wiping through it. Just keep calm. Either, like he said, the next time add more monsters, or maybe these were just the first wave. Like, as soon as they finish these guys off, around the corner come a couple more.
Yeah, maybe one shrieks. Like, maybe one of the monsters that you're killing, the last one shrieks, and as he shrieks, that's him calling for reinforcements, and immediately more come. Mm-hmm. Something like that. It's not that hard to do. You just have to be careful as a newbie because it's very easy to overdo things.
Yeah. Just practice. Practice makes perfect. Well, practice makes better. Just find a group that you can work with for your first time that is understanding that you are a new DM, supportive, and just kind of willing to work with you on it. And just one last thing before we go, because we're running real short on time. As a new GM, I recommend sitting down with your players afterward. Maybe end the session 15 minutes early and just kind of sit down with them and talk with them.
See what they like, see what they don't like.
Yeah, ask what they like, what they didn't like, their favorite part of the mission, the most memorable part of the mission, the part they didn't like. NPCs that they like, NPCs they don't like, just things that they're feeling about the way that you've run the game. And it will help you kind of realize what your group does and doesn't like. And really, that's a tip that applies to any DM or for any game, really. Because when you're running for a new group, you want to figure out what they do and don't like. This isn't meaning bend to their whim completely. This is just saying they do like this and they don't like this. Someone just asked what the fuck is a DM. DM stands for Dungeon Master. It's often interchangeable with GM, Game Master. It's the person who runs the game. When you sit down with your players afterwards, though, you just kind of want to figure out what they did and didn't like. So it's a good tactic. Helps you understand what you're doing good as a DM, what you could be doing better.
Yep. That's all the time we have for today, guys. We'll be posting this on YouTube later. Be sure to like, subscribe if you like our stuff. Tell us why you hate it, all that good stuff. Learn tabletop.rpgs.com. That was the site I mentioned earlier. I will post that on the YouTube link for you guys. Definitely very cool. Check it out. And we'll see you guys next time. Hopefully Dallas will get around to showing up this time.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Take care, guys.
See you guys.